So we're starting.
You're live.
There we go. It says live. Yep.
Okay, hello everyone. We're going to begin our meeting. So welcome everyone to the meeting, our staff, our council, and our public who are watching. And this is the special meeting that was called of the Committee of the Whole as of today, July the 16th. And we're going to be focusing on accessory dwelling discussions. And I think that's pretty well the only thing that's going to be on our agenda. So we're going to be letting our planner take over in a minute. But before we do that, I just want to remind all of council that if you have any disclosure of interest, you can declare that disclosure now or anytime during the meeting. And to begin with, I have the first motion, and I'll read it and need a mover and seconder, please. That is that the special meeting of Committee of the Whole agenda, July the 16th, 2020, be approved as circulated. Moved by, sorry, one sec. Moved by Karen and seconded by Jeff. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And I think then, as I said, we're going to jump straight into our meeting. And the first report, which is the only report, is going to be yours, Carl. And that is on the accessory dwelling discussion. So before we begin with Carl, Jasmine, did you have anything to say?
No.
Okay, so welcome and thank you, Carl, for bringing this part of the meeting to us.
Thank you, Mr. Reeve, and thank everyone for bringing me on board for this discussion. So this is this report's a follow-up to a report and a discussion we had on June 2nd about housing options. So as council will recall, we've been spending some time working with the community as well as ourselves as staff and council in assessing housing options. So not just fulfilling the bare minimum of what the Planning Act is requiring us to do for affordable housing and housing supply, but looking at it from the big picture. So given the magnitude of the subject matter, what we decided at the last meeting was that we would break this off into bite-sized chunks if we can, and that would allow us to dig into the policy and see what we can do. The other thing that the council is very interested in is looking to see what our comparator municipalities have done. So I've polled and researched a number of other rural municipalities throughout Eastern Ontario who've sort of approached this issue and looked at accessory housing, tiny homes, so and been making those sorts of amendments over the last few years, just to see what's been done out there and maybe give us some ideas for how we want to proceed there. So I presented some policy options, recommendations in this report, as well as a bit of a comparative review of what's being done in other places. So so at this point, I've broken the report down into 3 policy areas. That's secondary accessory apartments within a dwelling, separate, and also the question of minimum dwelling size. So I'll look to the chair if you wanted to address these individually, or if you wanted me to sort of summarize and present all of the report, and then we can break it out to discussion.
So Carl, I guess my question right now is, I just want to make sure that you made any comments that you wanted to make, first of all, on the background, and that's probably what you've been just doing. But if there's anything else that you wanted to say about the background, and you had then you had another subsection there, a discussion and options, and then we go straight into the secondary accessory apartment. But I wasn't sure whether you had anything else to add regarding the first part there, the background of your report.
I don't think I have I think I've essentially covered it. I'll just note too, as far as the relationship between what we're doing here and our broader official plan review that's happening as well. The broader OP review is going to be looking at some of the bigger picture municipal wide decisions that we should be looking at, such as severance numbers, servicing, infrastructure priorities, those sorts of things. So that I'm expecting to run sort of parallel to what we're looking at here, which is more targeted towards housing supply and affordable housing. So of course, ideally, the OP review and this can happen at a similar time, and we could just fold this policy into that. But from staff's end, we're looking at things like lot creation policies as more of an OP review discussion than an affordable housing discussion.
Okay, so I just want to, before we go into the first section there, the secondary accessory apartment and so on, I just want to make sure that council has no questions regarding the first part of your report, the background and the discussion and options. And I see that Jeff has something I'll go to Jeff. And if council has any questions about that section first, and then we can start with the first section. So Jeff?
I was just gonna say, I'd like to go, because Carl was making a comment about trying to group it all into one conversation. I'd like to kind of just make it into the 3 different conversations.
Yeah, and I agree. Basically, Carl, you've done a good job of already in the report doing that. So I think that we could keep it to that kind of discussion. So if I see no other questions, then we can go into the first one. And I guess you're saying that the first one there you want to talk about is the secondary accessory apartment?
Yes, please, if we follow the order in the report.
Yeah, okay. And that's specifically like within a dwelling.
Yes.
Okay, so that's good. So you can go ahead then.
Okay. So thank you. So our zoning bylaw currently allows an accessory apartment within a dwelling, and that needs to the main house needs to meet the zoning requirements. So in a rural area, it needs to be at least an acre in size and share the existing septic system and the existing street. So we're most of the way to what the Planning Act requires us to for inside the dwelling. The Act requires us to expand that to include row houses, semi-detached, those sorts of things, allow accessory apartments within those. There aren't a lot of that form of housing in the municipality, so that change isn't going to have a big effect. But looking at some of our neighboring municipalities, and I guess our comparator municipalities, a lot of them have something pretty similar to what we have here, but then also look to define a secondary dwelling based on its relationship to the main. So I think a lot of that is just a visual and a character thing. So if you're looking at an apartment that takes up the whole floor and is functionally its own, if it looks like a duplex, then typically it would be defined and zoned as a duplex. An accessory apartment is usually treated, in order to be allowed anywhere a single family home is allowed, it often has its own zoning characteristics that make it truly accessory. So take up less than, give it a size restriction, and occasionally allow them, I guess, limit where we allow them. So I think the first question I'll have for council here is, are there areas of the township where we feel that this sort of density, allowing accessory apartments, is inappropriate, say on private roads or floodplains, those sorts of things? Where would you want to limit them?
Carl, one thing that has been always pointed out when this came up before was the fact that not just in Montague, but pretty well anywhere, that when you start looking at private roads, a lot of the private roads aren't up to the same standard, obviously, as all our other roads. So then you might have an issue with emergency service vehicles getting in and so on. So, and I'll open up to everybody in council, but the only other concern that I have is that, like, I think what we request and kind of direct you to do as a council, I think depends on how big that lot is. Like if it's a 1 acre lot, it's one thing, but if it's if it's a 1 acre lot, you end up having two families living in one building, then there could be, as our public had pointed out in the survey, because I read all of the different comments and they were all over the place, really, but they certainly pointed out lots of things that could go wrong if you had too many people living on a 1 acre lot in a single dwelling place. So those are just two of my concerns, but I'll open up to council there and for questions and comments and so on. Claus?
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. Carl, with this accessory dwelling, basically talking a granny suite addition onto the house or above the garage or something, the septic system will be shared, of course. Are we?
You're not coming through at all, Claus.
Tank and the septic system itself will handle this extra secondary dwelling?
Claus,
Hello?
I'm gonna
Can you
take I'm gonna make a suggestion, Claus, is that you actually turn off your video. Your audio may come in a little bit clearer because you're cutting out. We're having a very difficult time hearing you. So I
Okay,
suggest maybe you turn off your video and participate through audio, and we'll try your comment again.
okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes.
if you can repeat your whole comment, Claus, because we didn't hear much of it.
Okay, my question is, with the secondary dwelling, Carl, you're basically talking what I refer to as a granny suite, a dwelling above the garage or whatever. Are we concerned if the septic system can handle this secondary dwelling, the size of the tank, the size of the system itself?
Yeah, Carl, I'll let you answer that.
Absolutely, that's an integral concern and one thing that we look at right now. Our zoning that we have now and every other zoning bylaw that I've seen requires that they obtain the approval of the health unit for whatever system they're either sharing or using. But that's absolutely essential, and I think that's one of the key reasons why my recommended policy for accessory apartments is that they only go on lots that meet the minimum lot size. So if the zoning bylaw requires a 1 acre lot, then I wouldn't be recommending we allow that sort of increased density on, say, a ½ acre lot, because you need that extra space to ensure that you have the adequate servicing capacity, or if you have to rebuild a septic system, you have a little bit more room. And I've seen a number of our comparator municipalities have taken a similar approach, either prohibiting accessory apartments on existing undersized lots, or in some cases even requiring larger lots for them.
Do you need some direction from us right now specifically on that?
That would be helpful to assist us with the policy. So at this point, I'm proposing a number of policies that were sort of based on what some of our peers have done, and also looking at what we think is a good approach in Montague. So firstly, we're proposing a design provision so that accessory unit maintains the visual characteristic of the dwelling. So that's share 2 of the yard, parking area, entry of the principal dwelling. That's something that Tay Valley has, and I've seen that in other zoning bylaws as well. And that an accessory apartment does not occupy the whole of the story. If it occupies the whole of the story, then it's a duplex and would be treated and zoned as such. I'm proposing no minimum dwelling size for an accessory apartment. So if you want something small, just a couple of rooms, whatever the building code would require, but a maximum dwelling size of 50% of the total floor area of the principal dwelling. And I just threw that number 50% out there. Certainly I've seen higher numbers and I've seen lower numbers, and whatever council is comfortable with. And then the next provision, of course, is that as I just mentioned, I'm recommending that we only allow them on lots that meet the minimum lot size of the zone in which they're located. So that would usually be a minimum of 1 acre. And then also permit them on all properties in which a single detached home is permitted, except for natural hazards, so floodplains. And I'm also proposing that we not allow them on private roads. As the Reeve mentioned, we have private roads of varying standards, and the concern I have with allowing a lot of potential increased density on private roads is some of them may be more challenging for emergency vehicles to access. Like any zoning bylaw, like any zoning provision, if somebody wants an exception and feels that their situation warrants that, they can certainly apply, and we would consider that on a case-by-case basis. But this is the proposed policy approach that I'm throwing out there for discussion and direction for accessory apartments within the dwelling.
Okay, and on part of the report, under this section, is all laid out there in, let's see, 4 points under the proposed policy approach. And that's what you're proposing. And I'm going to try to get consensus that that we either accept or not accept that proposal. And so if we can kind of try to keep our conversation and questions and comments specifically about this part of the report, then maybe we can try to move through it. So I'm going to go to Karen.
Question with reference to like the last point where it says natural hazard floodplain. Does that include your environmental protection zones that you've noted on some of the other municipalities having?
It does not. Normally, development often would not be permitted in those circumstances anyway. But if council, I think it's a good thing to include. And certainly, if council would like to reiterate that we don't support the scale of development within, say, existing natural heritage features that we identify, I can certainly word that in there. There won't be a ton, but there could be houses that sort of exist in a non-conforming state within, say, a wetland or very close to a wetland. So those are the sorts of things that we can certainly capture if council would like to.
Are there other areas that we should be adding under this section here? Like, you've got natural hazard and you've got private roads, but what about other areas? I think of, say, for instance, archaeological areas, or say areas, I forget what it's called, but where you could have land that could slide easily. There's a certain term for that. I'm just wondering if we're missing any areas there.
So, Mr. Reeve, yes, the good point. As far as areas that can slide, that would be considered a steep slope, which is identified as a natural hazard. So floodplains are mostly of what we'd be looking at in our area, but that also includes, say, areas of organic soils that can't be mitigated, and steep slopes. As far as areas of archaeological potential, our zoning bylaw doesn't. We don't have those mapped out. So that's the challenge that we have, and unless we were to look at, say, the criteria set in for Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport for archaeological assessments that we can look at for larger developments, say anywhere close to a water course, that would be, which is something that we tend not to look for as a rule for small developments such as this. But I think that it would be harder to implement that based on our existing zoning mapping.
Okay, so Karen, I just want to go back to you in case you had anything further to add, and then okay, so do we have any, Ian, if you have a comment or question then specifically about this area, thanks.
Yeah, I do. It's about 0.3 permitted on lots that meet the minimum lot size. Where is that going to be hashed out? Because, throughout our township, if you take the Adirondack area, the lots are less than an acre in size. So how are we going to play with that or deal with that?
Go ahead, Carl.
Most of the zoning around Adirondack actually allows smaller lots. So many of those lots are serviced. So the zoning bylaw recognizes that they're serviced and allows lots that are, say, 1/4 of an acre or a little less than 1/4 of an acre. So the considerations, the service and considerations are obviously very different there, since you have piped services rather than well and septic. So the same rule, based on the way I've worded it here, the same rules would apply. If the lot meets the smaller lot standard in those services.
In that area?
Yeah, so whatever the lot standard is in that individual zone would apply. However, if it's one of those little postage stamp lots, even in a serviced area, say a couple thousand square feet, you may not necessarily want to see that density on that very small lot.
But if we pass this generally, if we make if we pass it generally, and then we find out later that there's some lot that just won't work, can we deny that? Yes, Carl?
If it meets zoning and if it meets all other applicable law, then we would be obligated to issue the permit. So I think at this point through the zoning process, we're looking to sort of flag as best we can the sorts of things that council wants or feels is inappropriate for this form of development.
But then to go back to your point, Ian, and I'll come back to you, that about Adirondack, we could have, if we go ahead and pass this and we allow the accessory, this accessory, to, as long as it passes the zoning that's already in place, there could be a very, very small lot that we would have a problem with later on. So we have to be very careful if we make a general statement and we approve all of this. If there's a postage stamp lot someplace that won't work, then we're in trouble. Is that kind of going along with your thoughts, Ian, there, or what?
Well, that was exactly what I'm talking about, Reeve, and I just want to make sure that we don't get ourselves into pin ourselves in the corner where we can't get out of.
Well, that's what I agree, and I think that we should address that. Maybe Carl, you could make a comment about that.
So based on a policy that's proposed for council's consideration, if we have a postage stamp size lot that is smaller than the minimum lot size in whatever zone it's in, it would not qualify for an accessory apartment. So if you're in a serviced area and your minimum lot size is say 600 square meters and you have that, then the proposed zoning would allow you that accessory apartment. If you're in a rural unserviced lot where your minimum lot size is an acre, then that's the lot size you would need to have in order to have that approved. The caution I would give council is that the provincial policy does require us to be fairly permissive with allowing accessory apartments. So I think we can establish reasonable provisions, but and that's sort of where we're looking at. But if we were to say establish a broad across the board requirement in the township for serviced and unserviced lots that they need to be at least an acre, then the concern I would have is we might be vulnerable if we're challenged on that and perhaps perceived as being sort of getting around the provincial requirements. So that's why I'm suggesting we look at the minimum lot size in the lot in which you're located. And I don't believe any of our zoning bylaws allow lots that are, say, excessively small, like 2,000 square feet, that sort of thing.
Okay, so Ian, I just want to make sure you were finished, and then we're going to Jeff. So Ian first, and then Jeff. Okay.
All right, thank you, Reeve.
Okay, and Jeff.
Thanks, Reeve. I guess my biggest concern is trying to put too many restrictions, and I don't want to, for lack of a better term, say overthink this, because I mean, we don't want to put restrictions on people if they want to do something on their own land. And I get we might have an undersized lot, but if the health department thinks that the septic can go into that lot size, then who are we to say that they can't build there? So I understand the fact that we want to be careful, but I don't know how we would back ourselves into a hole. This is not like an extra a different building altogether. This is within the building that's already there. You might expand on it, but I guess my concern is I don't really want to put that many restrictions on it, because the restrictions are already there if there's a problem. So like and I'll go back to that septic. If it's an undersized lot and you try to put a granny suite on it that won't allow that to happen with the septic, then I can understand that, because I mean, like, it's very difficult. I mean, you can have a house that 5 people that live in, and they want to build a granny suite for 2 people. You could have that same house could have a house that 2 people live in, and they're going to build a granny suite for 1 person. I mean, it's I'm really eerie on, I almost like the policy we have right now. It's very, very open. It allows people to, like, if you want to do something else and you want to add to it, knock yourself out. Even adding the 50% size to I mean, if someone has, once again, I'll go to the other side of it. If someone has a 5-acre lot, and they have a big lot, and they want to add an addition so that their kids can now live with them, and they want to make it, and they have a 1,500 square foot house, and they want to add in a 1,000 square foot addition for that purpose. I mean, who are we to say no? It's their land, it's their spot. So I mean, I'm eerie on too many restrictions for this kind of thing, because I don't see how it would back us into a corner. And even for the private road idea, we don't have that many private roads. And if someone wants to add a granny suite to their private road so their mom can or dad can live in the basement, or they can use it to rent to one person for a rental property, I mean, I don't think that's going to dramatically change that road. That it's going to be now, we can't get emergency vehicles down with it. Anyway, that's kind of like, I'm very eerie on too many restrictions, because also when you put too many restrictions, you get people that will try to find ways around them. And I don't want to be in a township that's having to make restrictions that makes people have to go around them.
I guess one example that I would, one specific example that I would have as far as a private road, because we've got lots of private roads that's maybe or some private roads, maybe either no people or one person is living on now. But I think of a road, for instance, like Beak Road, where there may be 15 or 20 houses on Beak Road. And the thing is, if you only have one granny suite, it's not going to make a big difference. But if you have 20, if you have 15 or 20, and the Beak Road is already very narrow, and we've had issues in the past with emergency services and so on being able to get in there. That was my concern. But going back to what you were pointing out, Jeff, what you're talking about is actually the third bullet here that our planner is proposing that we approve. That is that we permit we permit on lots that meet the minimum lot size of the zone in which they're located. And it sounds like you're interested in taking that out and having no minimum lot size. So we'll have to kind of work on that, because as I said, we have to try to, we have 3 sections, and we have to try to get some consensus to direct our staff so that they can take our next steps. So I'm going to go to, I'll come back to you, Jeff, if you still want to respond to that for sure. But I have Karen and then Carl.
Can I
So
respond?
Karen, I'm sorry, did I cut you off, Jeff, there?
I was just going to say that, just I guess like a respond to that. Yeah, I mean, I get we have 3 different sections. I think this is they're all very unique in their own way, though.
Yeah.
And I think that this one here is like, when we get to the next section, my opinion might be very different. But in this one, when we're talking about in a house, I mean, we're talking about, like, so if we try to say we're not going to allow you to do that now, then they say, okay, fine, I'm just going to do an addition on my house. Can we say no to that addition now? I don't know if we can, because it's we don't have limitations on people doing additions to their house. We're only trying to put it onto building a granny suite. So what we're doing for additions has got to be the same for this, because if we try to put restrictions on it, then people are going to say that I'll just make an addition and I won't tell you. And I don't want to play that game with people. I'd rather have it, make sure that we're doing it the right way and the honest way.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we all right way. Before I go to you, Karen, before I go to you, Karen, though, Carl, do you want to respond to that last comment of Jeff?
I think Councillor Carroll made a very important point, and just to clarify as well, as far as the meet the zone in which the minimum zone in which the minimum lot size of the zone. So that policy exists currently for accessory apartments. So I'm proposing that we continue that policy. That being said, we don't need to, and as Councillor Carroll indicated, we may still want to carry forward a policy like that for, say, a detached. We may give a different answer if we're looking at like the coach house, the tiny house, those sorts of things. So we don't need to proceed the same way for both attached and detached. So I'll leave that with the council to determine, do we want to look at lot size for existing for the interior accessory apartments.
Okay, so Karen,
I thought Jeff was mentioning that he wants to change the maximum dwelling size, that 50%. Did I not hear that correctly?
That too as well. I don't, sorry, Reeve, sorry.
yeah, no, I think maybe I'll, Karen, I think Karen, your question is for Jeff. So Jeff, if you can, I think Jeff might have been talking about maximum and minimum, but Jeff, you can respond again to that and let's explain.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the no minimum for sure, because if someone wants to just make something small, make them small. The maximum I think is difficult because, like I said, I think I was using a point of if I had a 1,500 square foot house, but I'm going to have my kids move in and we're going to make it into, you know, instead of saying it's an addition, I'm going to add on to 1,000 square foot. I think those are unique cases too as well. So I don't know if having a maximum, maybe you don't want to make it so it's bigger than the actual house, but I mean, I don't know if that's that big of a deal or not. It's an extra restriction that makes me concerned about, well, then I'm just going to call it an addition. I won't call it a separate house. I guess that's kind of where does that fall into play?
Okay, does that answer your question, Karen?
But if we have to vote on something, that's what I'll be looking for to see what he's suggesting. Is
Exactly,
he suggesting
well,
75 or totally eliminate or?
Okay, so I'm wondering if council, if this is okay with council, like we've only got 4 bullets. And if I read each bullet individually, then we can say, yes, we can get consensus on each bullet. Is that okay?
Reeve, I have a question.
Yes, Claus?
Yeah, sorry if I have to interrupt that way because you can't see me. My question is back to the comment about, and I call it granny suite. So the purpose of this additional living space is for a relative, grandmother, grandfather, whatever, to live next door to the family. Is this correct? Or is it just for anybody?
This is
To be for anyone.
For anyone. So
Carol, you can answer that, please.
So accessory apartments, the way they're treated currently in zoning is they're for anybody. For detached accessory apartments, so like your coach house, our planning policies require them to be sort of intended for a family member or what have you. And I'm suggesting, and we'll look at that in the next bullet point, but I'm suggesting we move beyond that. And certainly from my perspective, I'm not interested in regulating whether it's a family member or anybody or just an income property. I focus on the use rather than who's using it.
So we would be developing a series of rental properties then?
Potentially, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to read this first bullet, please, and we'll see if we got consensus on it. Design provisions so that the accessory unit maintains the visual characteristics of the dwelling. 2 sections under that: shared 2 of a yard, parking area and entry with principal dwelling, and cannot occupy the whole of the story. So are we happy with that part of it? I'm going to go around. I'm just going to go around in a circle as I see everybody on the screen, if that's okay. So before I do that, did you have another question, Jeff?
I just want to clarify, when you're saying entry with the principal dwelling, does that mean it can't have a separate entrance?
Yes.
Yes. So
I'll have to have.
Yeah, Ian, sorry, Carl was answering there.
So by sharing 2 of the yard, parking area, and entry of the principal dwelling. So if it would have an entry entirely on its own, that's okay, so long as it shares an amenity space and a parking area. Likewise, if it has its own entirely designed yard, then it would have to share a parking area or an entry with the principal dwelling.
But it can have its own entrance though, right? Like it can have its own entrance?
It can, so long, based on what's presented here, it can, so long as it shares a yard and a parking area. So the purpose of that is just to ensure that it looks sort of like a house. If it's entirely its own separate equal facility, then it would be more of a duplex, and then duplexes are typically zoned in their own category.
But the nuts and bolts of my question really is they can still have a separate entrance and exit though, on their own though.
Yes, if they share a yard and a parking area.
Yeah, as long as they share all that stuff, it's just like, is there just a side door that they can get in and be able to go in that way if they want to? Because I mean, if someone wants to use it as a rental property, I mean, or a rental option, I mean, like, I want to make sure they're able to, that person can get in and out of their own spot without having to walk through the house.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, so Ian, anything, Ian?
No, I think that's fine. So essentially what you're saying, Carl, there is that as long as they share the same yard, so they have the same driveway, only one driveway, and that parking spot, they can have an addition on the side of the house that has its own entrance.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to start with you. I'm going to start with you, Ian.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so that's with this first bullet, so no problem. Jeff?
Yep.
Karen?
No, no problem.
And Claus?
No problem.
Okay, and I don't see any problem. So back onto the second bullet here. No minimum dwelling size, maximum dwelling size of 50% of the total floor area of the principal dwelling. So we're saying maximum dwelling size of 50% of the total floor area of the principal dwelling, and no minimum dwelling size. So does anybody have any questions on that? Is that, Ian?
So Carl, what the suggestion of the 50%, why the 50% or why any percentage? Can you just a little clarification or background why you think that would be important to add?
So this is one of these things where there's no inherently correct or incorrect answer. Most municipalities establish some requirement. I've seen lower than 50%. I've seen basically up to the size of the main dwelling unit. And that's more just to reiterate that this is an accessory apartment, not its own designed duplex that typically has a different, it's more of a visual thing really, and just looking at the design of the neighborhood and making it look like a house. But there's no, I'm throwing out a number there. I expected that there would be some good discussion on this number, and certainly, again, there's no right or wrong answer, and certainly I would have no issue if council wanted a higher number, for instance.
But saying maximum dwelling size of 50% of the total floor, basically that's basically saying that if somebody's going to have an accessory, it's not going to be bigger than what's already there existing. That's basically what that's saying, isn't it, Carl?
The way I had intended, and again, excellent point, and we can certainly clarify this based on how council wants to go. The way I had clarified that is if the main dwelling, all is said and done, if the main dwelling was left with 2,000 square feet of gross floor area, then the accessory dwelling couldn't be more than 1,000 square feet.
Exactly.
Question, Reed?
My opinion is it sounds like a pretty good compromise, because we could easily increase or decrease that figure, but to me the 50% seems like a fairly reasonable compromise, but it's up to council. So a clause, please.
Yeah, thank you, Reed. Question, Carl. So you're saying 50% of the principal dwelling. So if I have a 2-story colonial style home that's 2,500 square feet, first and second floor, then I can have a 1,200 square foot addition to that house?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what saying, Claus.
Now, to make it look conformally, as you said, you want to make it look like a house, that 1,200 square foot adding on to it, it's going to be a pretty big stretch on the side of the house. Would you not want that to be in a 2-story addition, or does it matter? Carl?
Yes, Carl.
Yeah, I'm not proposing that it matters in terms of the number of stories. I'm just proposing that we look at it in terms of the overall square footage, but that is very much a design preference that I'll take council's direction on.
Okay. Well, and if I may follow up, Reeve, my concern there is if it is a 2-acre lot and you're extending 1,200-foot square house towards the side yard, how close to the side lot line can you build?
Well, more importantly, what if it's a 1-acre lot?
Well, it's true. As I'm sure there's lots of 1-acre lot homes that we've got their full 2-story houses on them, I think.
Yeah, and there's going to be some even less than an acre in places like Adirondack.
Right.
Jeff?
I'm just going to say, but there's already, like, and Carl would probably attest to that, there's already planning rules in place. I mean, you can only go so close to your lot line. That's already there. So, I mean, like, it's like, long as the people are following those rules as far as they can't, like, obviously you can't build half your house on your neighbor's property. I mean, like, as long as you're adhering to those rules are already in place, who are we to say how big you can build your house? If you want to build a 4,000 square foot house and pay $10,000 in taxes, then, you know, like, Bob's your uncle, do it. I mean, like, I mean, who are we to say no, as long as they're following those rules? Like, and Carl, I don't know if you can chip in on that. I mean, like, as long as they're following, there's just a space to the lot line, is there not?
Okay, Carl, you can respond and then I'll go to Ian.
Yes, just respond to Councillor Carroll's comment. He's absolutely correct. I'm not proposing through this exercise that we change the existing side yard, front yard, rear yard setbacks that we have for existing dwellings. So in addition to a dwelling that classifies as an accessory apartment would be subject to the same setback requirements that we have already.
Okay, Ian?
You know what, I agree with Councillor Carroll on this. I don't know that we should really even have a number there. So, you know, if they want to make it 1,100 square feet, let them make it 1,100 square feet if the original house is only 500. It doesn't make any difference to me. You know, they could rip down the house and build a 4,000 square foot home on the same piece of property. It wouldn't make any difference at the end of the day. So they're allowed to do it. We're almost going in a little one step too far. There's other, as stated before, there's other things that are already in place to limit, I think, you know, lot lines and everything else and setbacks and everything else. So if they want to build one they own a 500 square foot house, they want to build one that's 1,500 square feet, how about her? So all good.
So the thing is, though, we've already mandated like lot lines and we've already mandated setbacks and so on. So I see nothing wrong with us coming up with some kind of a figure because I guess like I don't see anything wrong with that. I don't think that we're over regulating because, like I said, we've already got in place lot lines and setbacks and so on, front yards and the side yards. So, but what we're dealing with here then is the proposal is maximum dwelling size of 50% of the existing floor, total floor area. So we're either going to go with that or no figure or higher or lower. So we need to come to a consensus here, I guess. Karen?
So Carl made reference to duplexes are handled separately. So how is a duplex handled separately than the secondary accessory apartment? Say, for example, a duplex can be an upstairs converted, or it's not a side by side, that becomes something separate. So how does this distinguish differently from those because of the fact that we're talking about this to say whether or not we need a maximum size?
Okay, Carol?
Yes. Good question. So duplexes you're correct, duplexes are defined by the horizontal separation. So there's a unit on the entire upper floor and a unit on the entire lower floor. If it's a vertical separation, it's a semi-detached. So those are considered to be slightly higher density of development and are only permitted in our more urban serviced areas. So for instance, in a rural area, a single detached dwelling is the only permitted form of a main residential use. So unless we are to amend the zoning to allow duplexes everywhere in the rural zone, and that's certainly, I've seen zoning bylaws that allow 2-unit dwellings as of right, then an accessory apartment, based on whatever definition we create here, an accessory apartment would be the only way that a second unit within the dwelling can be permitted. But they're defined separately because they're considered a higher density and are zoned in more urbanized serviced areas.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to this bullet and see if we can get consensus, because what this bullet is requesting or proposing is that we have no minimum dwelling size, and the maximum dwelling size is 50% of the total floor area of the principal dwelling. So I'm going to see if we have consensus for this. Ian first.
I'd like to see the maximum dwelling size increased.
Okay. Okay. Then, well, I'll see if we can come out of this with getting something. So you're proposing, what are you proposing?
At a minimum, I think.
Maximum. Pardon?
At least at a minimum, 80% of the total floor.
So instead of it being 50%, you're saying 80%. I see a hand up, Karen.
Can we say no minimum, but the maximum is to the size of the principal dwelling? Because you're not going to make an accessory any larger, so why don't you say equal to
Yeah, but then
the size?
that would be 100. That would be 100%.
Yep. Yep.
So right now it's being proposed at 50, and Ian is saying 80.
I'll agree with Karen on that.
So you're saying, so Karen's saying 100%. So in other words, we're saying there's no minimum, but the maximum is equal to the existing total floor. So I think that I've got consensus or not consensus yet, but I think that we have agreement there with Ian and Karen, and I saw Jeff's hand up. Jeff?
Yep, I'm good with that.
Okay, and then that's 3 already, but Claus, I'll ask you.
No, I think 100% is a little too high, but anyway, you've got consensus of 3, so we'll go with that.
So yeah, and I tend to agree with you. I think, Claus, that it's a bit high for me also. I guess I just wondered. I guess one of the things I wonder is that if we could end up then having quite a few twice as big as what we have. But anyways, we'll go with the consensus. And so we have consensus on that. That's going to be 100%, Carl, okay?
So can I just ask for just a quick item for clarification for the minutes? I have written, council provided a consensus to limit the maximum to no larger than the principal dwelling. Is that okay wording, or do you want it to read 100%?
I think that the first one is fine. We've got consensus that we're going to allow maximum dwelling size to be equal to the existing floor model.
Okay.
Size.
I just wanted
if there's a better way to word it, I think that's fine. But I think you know what we've got consensus from. Carl.
Yes, the council's direction here. I've seen other municipalities do something very basically follow the same line. So there's certainly wording that I can work with, and I can bring that back. But that's definitely achievable, and certainly I have clear direction here.
Okay, good. So I'd like to go on to the third bullet then, and that's the one that you were talking about originally, Jeff. That's the third bullet, reading permitted on lots that meet the minimum lot size of the zone in which they are located. So in other words, if we already agree, if the rural is 1 acre or 2 acres, or as Adirondack, it's smaller lot sizes and so on. So Jeff, I think I'll let you put something on the table there, and then we can see if we have consensus or not.
I just think the health unit and our other zoning bylaws where like you can't infringe out so far on people's lawns and you can't build a septic on someone else's property. So, I mean, I would think the current ones that we already have and the way the health unit would say, because the health unit might say you can't do that because the septic system you need to build, you don't have enough space for. I think we already have everything in place that already deal with that. But I'm game to listen if Carl has anything to add to that. But that's where I kind of see it, where I think we already have other things that are already in place. Anyways.
Okay. Basically what you're saying then is how is it different than this third bullet?
100%.
Pardon?
I personally have no problem with it. So
the way it is?
I don't think that Carl would have a problem with it. He put the suggestions there.
Yeah. So you're saying, Ian, then that you have no problem with the third bullet?
No.
Jeff?
I just said that
you do have a problem with it.
I'm just saying I think we have other provisions already in place. I mean, I think there's like if someone can do it and they can add a 200 square foot addition so they can have a little suite for their and I'll use the sappy way here, but like for their widowed mother to be in. I mean, like, let them build the 200 square foot spot for that person to be in. If the health unit's going to allow them to do it, it's going to fit in the septic system. That's going to fit in everything else.
Okay, but I seem to think that Ian is Ian, you're agreeing with the bullet the way it's printed, the way it is, and which is permitted on lots that meet the minimum lot size. But Jeff, you're kind of disagreeing with that, and you're saying that you'd like to be able to allow any size lot, even smaller than the minimum lot size that we've already got, right?
Yep. If it meets all the other rules, like with septic system and everything else, yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to go around with the other three of us there, and we'll see how we pan this thing out here. Karen.
So if Jeff is saying you could put an addition on a smaller lot, but we couldn't do this because this is a stipulation we're putting in, is that correct, Carl?
That shouldn't make any difference.
So the proposed policy that's here is a continuation for what we have already, and either way, I think there's, in any circumstance, if somebody's building an addition that increases the fixture count or is creating bedrooms or bathrooms or what have you, there's going to be a health unit look at it. Of course, creating a separate dwelling unit for new people living in it potentially has a larger increase. But as Councillor Carroll had indicated, there's ultimately where health unit approval for anything is absolutely essential. So the reason that we're proposing the existing dwelling size is, a lot size meaning meeting the current is, it avoids, it's a bit of a question of risk. So if there is if you do need to replace your septic system later on, if something goes wrong, at least you're more likely to do it if there's additional capacity added to it. So there's a little bit of an element of risk. I wouldn't say it's like there's still going to be that review one way or the other. And actually, I hate to digress as well, but another question that I am going to be posing on there is, does council see that an accessory apartment need to be connected to the existing septic system? And I'm going to pose that same question for the next section as well, because the health unit doesn't limit the number of septic systems on a lot. So that's another thing that certainly I'll take council's direction on as well.
Okay, so trying to move forward to get consensus here. Karen, I'd like to hear from Karen and Claus.
Well,
Jeff suggested, sorry,
Claus, I'm just going to Karen here first. Well, I'll go to you, Claus, and then I'll come back to Karen. So, Claus, you go ahead. Hi, Claus. Can you hear me, Claus?
Suggestion is fine with me. Can you hear me?
So is the bullet okay with you, Claus?
Yes, I can.
Okay, Karen?
Yes.
All right, Karen, do you know?
Well, I want to say yes, but the separate septic, because that's the only thing is as long as the lots are large enough to allow for it, should they need a separate septic? Because I didn't know you could have more than one on a location.
Yeah.
So,
Well, so I didn't realize either about the two septic systems on one lot. I guess, you know, there would be an awful lot of lots that probably the health unit would not allow two septic systems on it, but trying to get consensus on this permitted on lots that meet the minimum lot size. I personally like the idea of the way that it's written here. Permitted on lots that meet the minimum lot size of the zone in which they are already located. I think I would agree with that part of it. So I think that we've got Ian and Claus and myself are happy with the way that it is right now. So that would be consensus. But now we can go to the question, or do you want to address, Carl, do you want to address the question right now about septic systems then?
That's it.
Yes. Okay, so I've got a question first from Ian, and then Carl, you can be thinking about this because I'd like you to respond to this if you want us to discuss the possibility of having two septic systems on one lot. So Ian, please.
Listen, as far as I'm concerned, if the health unit says it's fine to put two septic systems on one lot, I can put two septic systems on one lot. There's probably not gonna be that much of a difference. If they do the addition, they're gonna have to upsize the existing septic anyway, or they wouldn't be putting a separate system in. So, you know, there's probably a requirement to do so anyhow, potentially. And if not, most people aren't gonna just go and spend $20,000 or $30,000 or $40,000 for no reason. So if they can fit one on there and the health unit's happy with it, so be it, if that's what you want to do.
Certainly seems to make sense, but Carl?
Yeah, so just the feedback I got from the health unit's chief building official and public health inspector is that their office has no objections in principle to allowing a second sewage system being installed on a single deeded property to serve a secondary dwelling, garden house, granny suite, etc. So she views this as more of a planning issue, and the concerns that separate servicing with separate entrance septic and well supply might encourage property owners to seek approval for severance. So that wouldn't really apply in this case, dealing with a dwelling or dealing with an accessory apartment within the dwelling. But the way the policy is worded right now is I'm not touching it, which means then if the health unit will okay it, then so be it. Leave it to the health unit to decide if they'll approve a second septic system on the lot.
Well, you've got consensus on this issue right now. Karen?
question on the wording. Does that mean that you can have a septic bed, but if the addition would only allow for a holding tank, that's something they're going to approve? When you...
Yes, Carol?
The way the wording is right now is I'm not prescribing the sort of septic system. Ultimately, it's up to the approval of the health unit. So if the health unit will approve a holding tank in addition to whatever's there right now, then that would be their call.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to go on to the next, to the very last bullet then here. And it reads as permitted on all properties in which a single detached home is a permitted use except for natural hazards and private roads. So I think we did have some sort of a difference of opinion there possibly. So I'm going to open it up and it'll be Ian first.
I mean, I don't mind the bullet point, but I kind of agree with Councillor Carroll in the fact that we should take the private roads portion off.
Sorry, can you repeat the last part? It wasn't too clear.
I would like the private roads portion removed.
Okay. So I'm just going to see if we have consensus then. First, did you have a comment or question, Karen?
Well, then doesn't that change because of the fact that we have to then have some sort of a minimum maintenance standard on private roads to ensure that the emergency services can get through to it then?
Yeah, I thought we already have do we
Yeah.
not already have a minimum standard for those roads?
Not for private roads.
No.
No? Okay, so, so that's a good question then, Karen. If we were going to allow these, this permitted use on private roads, then does that going to affect the standard? I think that's your question. So who can answer that, Carl?
So as far as the standards go, I would best defer that to either Jasmine or to Jamie. But the reason that I'm proposing the private road exception there, and I've seen it go both ways. I've seen municipalities allow them on private roads, seen municipalities not allow them on private roads, but it's more just a reflection that we can't really zone to say, unless we want to specifically open up all of our private roads and say we can allow it here, but not there. The challenge is, of course, in the absence of specific maintenance standards or development standards on a private road, we have a variety of qualities of private roads. And certainly it's not necessarily the issue that the first one that goes in there is going to create a problem, but if there's the possibility of several others, then are we creating more of a demand on private infrastructure that may not be to the municipal standard? So that's why, broadly speaking, that provision there is proposed. Realistically, it's unlikely we're going to see hundreds of these all on our private roads, but we could see some.
Question, Reed?
Yes, Klaus?
Thank you. Just, I'm not concerned private roads one way or the other, but on Carl's last comment, we could see a few of these happening on private roads. Would that mean that if we do get 5, 6, half a dozen or whatever on a private road down the road in the number of years, that we're taking over that private road? Somebody's saying no. Just a question.
If I can answer that question, council has at any time the ability to say adopt a private road if it's brought up to appropriate road standards. But that's a decision that would be made by council, the council of the time. So they have the ability to do that if they want, but there's nothing that would compel a council to do that.
Okay, thank you, Jasmine.
Karen?
So then if we don't have to bring a road up or take it over, but we've allowed accessory dwellings to get on there, does that then give us any liability should an emergency vehicle not be able to get there?
Yes.
Well, I think it does, and that's a real concern that I have right now. I might have missed your hand, Ian. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, Ian, please. Sorry.
My question is for Jasmine or Carl. Do you guys, either one of you, have any idea how many private roads are in the township?
I do. So I think we only have 4 private roads in the township.
Which are, Jasmine, if you have do you know them?
Cottage Road, Beak Road, Jim Mar Lane, and there is one more.
Old Church, old Orchard Road or whatever.
Yeah, that might be it. They're all.
You also have Blinkhorn. I think there's 7 in total, either 6 or 7.
You got Blinkhorn.
You've got a few
I'm
more.
not
I think
sure.
there's
Blinkhorn is a private road in terms of like
Yeah, Blinkhorn is a private road.
okay.
Yep. There's 7 of them, if I remember correctly, from a few years ago for discussion.
Well, we have what about Al Maloney?
Ellen Maloney is
No,
not.
it's not. No. I could see a real issue here on, it doesn't matter which road, but I could see a real issue if we go ahead and allow these accessory dwellings to go up onto private roads, then I could definitely see it. I would have a concern about that. If it was just going to be one, no problem. But if we approve this, then we can't say yes to one and not to somebody else. And I know that for some of those 7 roads, if that's how many there are or whatever, it wouldn't be much of a problem. But all you have to do is drive down a road like Beak Road, which is still fairly narrow. And my concern is for the people, not just are the emergency service people trying to get in, but my concern would be for the people who live on those private roads. I have a concern about this, and I feel that we would be doing a bit of a disjustice to them, but that's how I feel. So I think I see Jeff, and then back to Karen.
Can I just
So
address
Jeff-
if that's okay? Just before we move on,
Sure.
there was
Sorry,
a comment.
sorry, just a sec. I can't hear who's talking. One sec.
It's Jasmine.
Okay, sorry, Jasmine. Yeah, I thought maybe it was.
No, there was a question about liability related to access to the private roads. Keeping in mind that I'm not, an insurance adjuster or a lawyer, but I do believe that in terms of the liability for access on private roads for emergency vehicles, is taken. They know when they move to those properties that they are of increased risk. Similar to, say, a farmer who has a long laneway that chooses to put a locked gate across their driveway. It's a level of risk that they do take on. I'm not sure if say allowing more dwellings on a private road would increase our liability in terms of emergency access. I know that was a question. I just wanted to address it.
Okay, Jeff.
So I may have 2 points because I'll use an example. So up in my cottage, it's on a private road, and we have to deal with that too as well. The municipality has nothing to do with that private road, and we have a road association that we pay insurance to because we want to make sure. And that was advised to us by a lawyer because we were trying to say we don't want people on a road, but we want to try to maintain the road a bit. But as soon as you start maintaining that road, even as a private residence on a private road, you are now taking liability of that road, and you better have insurance when you're doing it. So not that I want to but that was the advising that we had for. So when we did it, we everybody chips in money to maintain that private road, but we also pay $1,200 of insurance a year to make sure that we're protected if somebody. And we use the example of a kid in a 4-wheeler has a rip down that road and he flips his 4-wheeler. We have protection if they decide to sue us for that issue. So I mean, there is no thing there, and I also hope that the people that live on those private roads also. I'll let someone turn that off. The people that live on those private roads should be well aware of that, and I hope that they have insurance of their own to make sure they're protected. On the other side too, as well as if someone wanted to build a house on one of those private roads, is there any limitations to stop them?
No.
So I'm going to throw that at Carl.
Yeah.
I mean, is there a limitation if someone wants to build a house on that road?
Our zoning by, sorry.
Go ahead, Carl.
Thank you. Yes, our zoning bylaw has created a special zoning category called limited services residential for residential development on private roads, and that's most of the waterfront development. So it is, we are limited. We can't create new lots we can't create new lots on private roads unless they have water. I think the zoning and our official plans are very restrictive of private roads. Like we don't allow new private roads, for instance. It's not an ideal form of development. So we're basically making do with the existing context that we have right now and very limited expansion. So we're not going to be seeing a new private road coming up anytime soon unless going through a condo process, which is a whole different schematic. But yes, if you have a vacant lot on the water on a private road, then so long as you meet your zoning, you can build on it.
So if you don't mind, Reed, as the answer,
Yes.
if you can build a house on it still on a private road on a lot, how are we saying no to the person that wants to build a granny suite on their private road? Like, I mean, I don't get how we can say that, and I know there could be an increase in that road usage, but there's that opportunity that another house can be built on there anyway. So that now we're kind of, I don't know, I think we're causing another problem. And I think we got to counter back at the point too, as well, is just because you open up this option, we have the option of people being able to build granny suites already. We're not going to have everybody on those private roads building granny suites. I mean, most of them probably don't even want a granny suite, and maybe I'm out of turn on that. But I mean, I think it's, I don't think putting a limitation on the private road really just, it works, and it's fair to those people too as well if they want to do that.
Okay, Karen?
So I thought Carl just made reference to private roads could only be developed if they were on waterfront though.
Why is that, Carl? Why does it have to be on water? Yes, Carl.
Just give me a moment here. I'm in the official plan now. Just give me a moment, please.
I guess I understand what you're saying, Jeff, and you might sway me on this one yet. But I guess one of my thoughts was that, because I don't have the facts here, but let's say, for instance, if you had a private road that had, I'm going to say mostly cottages, cottage type dwellings, where people use them as cottages.
Mhm.
But then if we approve this, and then they all of a sudden want to upgrade their cottage into a single dwelling home and then build an accessory dwelling on top of that, if you add whatever, 10, 12, or 15 of those, I'm not saying we ever would, but if we did, then that road may not be adequate for what we're proposing. So yeah, I'll throw that back out. And Jeff, I'll go back to you, Jeff.
Actually, if you can throw it back to me, because I'll have experience a little bit with that too as well. Because I'll use, once again, so up in my cottage, there's we live on the very end of that road, and ours is a cottage, and in the wintertime it's not accessible. So the neighbor of us two doors down, and bear in mind this road is probably about a kilometer long, and the neighbor down from us bought the cottage that he has it, and he built a house on the water, knowing full well the road was private, and that now he had to undertake the plowing of that road throughout the winter, which he did. He got a contract to do it and everything else. It cost him, I think he paid like $1,500 a year now for snow plowing of that private road. So he took that on his obligation to do that. It's a private road. It's their obligation to deal with that road. It's their obligation to maintain that road. If they want to add an accessory dwelling to their road and to their maintenance, it's on their cost of them dealing with that road and having it done. It's a private road. It has nothing to do as far as that deals with us. They need to make sure it's maintained to their part of it. If they're not interested in doing that, then maybe the private road residents can then we're not making this rule 100%. They can come back to us and say, we don't want you guys doing that because that's going to add increase, and then I get it. But I don't really think it's up to us to tell you on your private road, you should have insurance on your road. You should be making sure you're maintaining that private road. It's it's not us to tell you that you can't put something there.
So I could give exactly the same example as I have a cottage also on a private road, and one person about 3 or 4 years ago built a great big house. Same thing. That person pays for the snow plowing in the winter because none of us use it anyway. She's the only one that's using it. But the problem now is 2 years later, she's now coming to the association, for instance, and the municipality where our cottage is wanting us to turn that private road into a municipally owned road, which is the next thing which is the next thing that could happen.
You can try that. I'm sorry, I'm speaking a turn there. You can try that.
Oh no, just a sec, Jeff. I want to go to. I'll come back to you, but I saw Carl's hand up, and I'd like him to respond to that.
That's fair. Yep.
So I did do a quick little policy scan here, and just to confirm, the we can't issue a building permit for a house unless on a private road, unless it is a lot located within a limited services residential zone or an island. So you need to have frontage on a public road or be in the LSR zone or an island. So the LSR zone typically, not necessarily always, but typically only applies to waterfront property. So the official plan does not allow the creation of a private road or the extension of an existing private road. And basically, the primary reason for that is that's considered not an ideal servicing arrangement for residents and for the community. There are provisions for, say, a condominium kind of arrangement, but otherwise it could lead to challenging situations. And I know different municipalities have gone to battle with the province over these sorts of policies before. And I can think of an example in Drummond North Elmsley Township a number of years ago, where the zoning bylaw there doesn't allow a home occupation on private roads. And in this case, we had just a little salon that was looking to expand, and they applied for rezoning, and that just opened up a very challenging situation in the neighborhood, where we had residents who were complaining that this business was bringing in all sorts of traffic into the community, and certainly the municipality was in a lot of pressure about whether or not we were assuming liability. And ultimately the zoning was approved, but then there was subsequently a debate between the residents and the road association about insurance costs. And it wasn't a municipal concern, but it was nonetheless, it wasn't something that anybody really, it was a challenging situation for everybody. And that's, I think, one reason why a lot of the time these sorts of restrictions are in place, just to avoid potential hard feelings if there is an expansion and people debating over whose responsibility it is.
And I mean, let's face it, there could be hard feelings one way or the other, because there could be a person right now on one of our private roads that wants to be able to eventually put up an accessory dwelling. So that person would be obviously upset if we include private roads. But I guess I have a question for you, Carl, just generally for everybody. First of all, we're giving you consensus right now to kind of take the next steps and move forwards to put together this overall package for us, but it's not cut in stone. And so I guess my thought is that there may be something in our discussion tonight, it could be this one or something else, where we simply red flag it and say, okay, we're not quite there yet. So can we red flag this issue until later? Because I also know that, we all know that we also have to hear from the public eventually when there's a public meeting about this. And we really we've heard from maybe no one who lives on private roads. If we find out that everybody living on a private road wants to be able to build an accessory dwelling, or many people want to be able to have the right to be able to, then that might change us a little bit. So I'm almost wondering if it's possible that, if it makes any sense for us to kind of red flag this, or anything else that might come up tonight. So Carl, if you can answer that, please.
Yes, absolutely. So just to reiterate, nothing coming out of this meeting is getting set in stone. We're still early in the Planning Act process. Before council can adopt a bylaw, we need to schedule a public meeting where the policy direction that I guess council would like to advance on gets presented to the public. We hear the feedback and we consider changing it. So for instance, when we created the cannabis policy last year, it evolved a lot between when we within our group had established what we thought we wanted to go to the public with, and it evolved a lot and based on to what we eventually ended up approving based on the public feedback. And that's and that's good. I think that's a good, that's the way the planning process is supposed to work. So certainly nothing here is getting set in stone. At this point, the way I envision the process unfolding is that the next step is that I take council's direction, and then I refine it into, I guess, the exact language that we like, and then we take that to the public for feedback. If council is not ready to decide on, say, private roads, or wants to research something else, then we'll take that direction. We'll come back to you with whatever information you're looking for to sort of help inform your direction.
So I'm just wondering if I can try to get consensus then for this last bullet, for the whole bullet, except for the private road part, and we just red flag that part of this bullet for now. Would that be okay if I tried that, maybe council?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
so again, Ian, just because you're the first one line there on the screen, on my screen, so I should probably reverse it, maybe go the other way, but I'll put you on the spot again, Ian, if you don't mind. So that's for this last bullet. We're asking for consensus for this proposal for the whole bullet, except for the private road, and we simply red flag that for now. Is that okay with you, Ian?
That's fine.
And Jeff?
Yeah, that's fine.
And
Can I make is there a consensus of either way though right now? Maybe there's a consensus right now that people don't want to have it on the,
I'm not sure. There may be. I can do it one way or the other. I mean,
go ahead. I mean, it doesn't hurt my feelings if we go either way it goes. It's just more.
No, I can ask. It's just that I feel on this, in this one case, I feel that it might be important that we might try to get some feedback from people who are living on private roads. That's all.
Sure.
So the consensus I'm trying to get then is for this last bullet, except for the private road part, and we'll just red flag that, and we can either add that or take it away later. So Jeff?
Yep, sounds good.
And Karen?
Yes.
And Claus?
Yes.
And myself is fine with that. So that's sort of the direction that we're giving you for now, Carol. If you have a comment or question, otherwise we'll go on. Yes, Carol?
Yes, Councillor Jennings earlier had suggested natural heritage features as an area where we would maybe not like to accommodate that sort of density. Is council okay with adding that as an item, an exclusion item?
So that's natural heritage?
So like wetlands, for instance.
Oh, wetlands. Oh, sure. Oh, well, definitely. I would have to totally 100% agree with you, Karen, on wetlands. But again, that's something that's already in all our official plan and zoning and everything else. Like, we would not allow anything on wetlands anyways. So why do we need to add it here? Yes, Carl?
The only circumstance I could see is if there's a house that's already there, and then the wetland mapping is, as we know, it's not always precise, or it's not always, doesn't seem to always reflect the facts on the ground. So if we have a house that's in an area that is later designated as wetland, and that does happen, then that house becomes legally non-conforming and it can exist, but you're not going to build another house there. So I guess the question then just becomes, are we in a circumstance such as that? And I can't think of any particulars in the township. There probably are some, but in a circumstance such as that, are we okay with allowing a accessory apartment?
Well, I like your point, Karen, about this, about adding. You wanted to add that?
Well, yeah, that was my question, because I'd seen it in one of the others where they did make reference to the environmental protection zones. So that's why I just asked about it.
Well, I think, are you proposing that we do that?
It was a suggestion I had, yep.
Okay, so I'll go around and ask consensus then. So obviously you're saying yes. Claus? Jeff?
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And Ian?
Yep.
Okay, so thanks for that, Karen. And yes, we have that direction also then, Carol, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, so if we can now, thanks for that. If we can go on to the next.
Excuse me, Reeve Dobson.
Yes,
I'm just going to ask if we're going to bring forward information regarding private roads, in terms of beneficial information for council to know for the next discussion. I did write down an addition of the number of private roads in the township, and then I thought it might be beneficial for council to know, say, the number of existing lots on those private roads. Would
you
there
mean
be-
available lots?
Well, it'd be like any existing lot, so something that could be built on or something that would have a house on it already.
Exactly, okay. No, I think that would be great information if we can get that.
Sure.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't think we need, you don't need direction for that, do you? Or do you want that? Do you
I
want?
don't, we could if we wanted to be overly formal, but I think we're probably okay.
Well, if you wish it, I can go round.
Sure.
Okay, I see Ian's head going up and down. I think he's saying yes, Ian.
Yeah,
Okay,
good to go.
and Jeff, his thumbs up, and Karen,
Yes, please.
and Claus,
Yes,
and myself. So thanks for that, Jasmine. So you have direction there too.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody, for that. And now we're going to go on to the next section, and that's the secondary accessory dwellings, detached. And I'm wondering, just so that everybody understands the difference, Carl, if you can slightly just explain the difference. I just want to make sure that any public that's listening also understands the difference for this one. So this is now accessory, secondary accessory dwellings detached. If you can just sort of draw everybody's attention to the difference there.
Certainly. So the previous section, we were discussing accessory apartments within the existing dwelling. So what you're most often somebody carving out a basement suite as a rental. Right now, we're looking at detached accessory buildings. So like a coach house, a granny flat, a tiny home, those sorts of things where they're their own separate building on the lot. And a lot of the policies that I've seen there's a lot of similarities in the policies I've seen between the attached and the detached, but there are some key differences as well. So is council ready for me to sort of go into where we're at then and jump into the proposed policy, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, I think so, that you've got the proposed policy approach, and now the thing is, and we've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bullets there. So yes, you may as well just explain each one, and then we can see if we have consensus.
Thank you. So I think we've had there's a lot to work from if we're working with what's been done in other municipalities. And the nice thing, especially about things like tiny homes, is there's a wide variety of policy approaches that municipalities have taken on that. And that's really, and that I think gives us the confidence to really do what we feel is the right, make the right call for the residents of Montague Township. So right now, the policy that we have right now only allows a garden suite as a temporary use for a specific occupant, usually a resident. So my recommendation, and certainly it's required by provincial law, but also I think it's good planning and good for the community, is to open that up a lot wider and give people the opportunity to create that on a more as of right basis without having to necessarily go through a zoning. Design becomes a lot bigger a consideration, and that's where we see size restrictions on a lot of municipalities, setback restrictions, and certainly some zones allow accessory, say an existing garage or outbuilding, to be very close to the lot line. If that's converted into a small house, is that going to create a privacy issue if you have windows right on the lot line? And Tay Valley has created some good policy to sort of block to look at that. So I think broadly speaking, I'm proposing a policy approach that has a lot of the same, a lot of commonalities with the for accessory, but for the attached accessory, but has a few other items. So I'm proposing they be permitted on lots that meet the minimum lot size of the zone in which they're located. So same zoning provisions as before. No minimum dwelling size, and a maximum dwelling size of 50% of the floor area of the principal dwelling. So the question for council there is, are you comfortable with an accessory building that's the same size as the main one, or do you want it smaller so that it's clearly accessory? And that's certainly, that's entirely at council's discretion on what you feel is an appropriate design. So I'm suggesting that they be permitted in interior side yards and rear yards only, subject to, so not the front yard, but the side yard and the backyard, and subject to the same setbacks as for a main dwelling. So of course, if it's a 2-acre lot, you have lots of room to play with. If it's a 1-acre lot and the house is already on one side of the lot, then your accessory building is going to be somewhere else. I'm also, and this is, I liked what Tay Valley had done, existing accessory structures within required setbacks. So let's say an accessory building can be located very close to a lot line. It can still be converted into a residential unit so long as no habitable room windows face the shared property line. I'm also proposing a limit of 1 story if it's in a settlement area. And the reason I'm proposing that is you already have a denser residential development context. So 1 story would, it's intended to sort of minimize the effect of, I guess, overcrowding a lot. Whereas if you're in a rural area and have several acres, then a little 2-story accessory building won't really make a difference. I'm proposing, and I think this one's going to have there's be some good discussion on this one. I'm proposing that it share the driveway with the principal dwelling. And that's what's in our our entrance policies that we have right now only allow 1 entrance on one residential entrance on a lot. So we can't approve a second residential entrance onto, say, a 200-acre lot. So if we were to revise that, then we'd have to change our entrance policies as well. And again, I've seen municipalities go both ways on that, and that's very much up to council. And then I'm also proposing that they be permitted on all, similar to before, permitted on all properties in which a single detached home is permitted use except for natural hazard, and I'll add natural heritage to that as well, and then private roads. So I'll look for council's direction on this proposed policy approach.
Okay, thank you for this, Carl. I'm going to go to Karen first, but hopefully we can kind of go through. I think if we can just go through maybe 1 bullet as quickly as possible and get approval for each one. I think it seems to be simpler that way, but Karen, if you want to make a first comment on this.
Well, Carl makes reference to the natural heritage, but I was making reference to environmental protection zones. Are they the same thing?
Yes, Carl.
Generally, yes.
Okay.
So our environmental, so we have a wetland designation, but then different zoning bylaws treat these different. And I know in some municipalities, an environmental protection zone is the same as a wetland zone. It applies to wetlands. So I just use the broader natural heritage term, and then I'll work on the proper wording based on how everything's worded within our own documents.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, Karen.
Second question though, when Carl started off, he made reference to the definitions of the coach house, tiny house, granny flats, etc. Does that mean it includes mobile homes?
Yes, Carl.
So that's up to that's up to council. So currently, our zoning bylaw does not allow mobile homes on an individual lot. I've seen zoning bylaws allow, say, a mobile home as, say, a granny flat or as an outbuilding. Mobile homes are a defined term, and they're typically tied into a building code classification. Whereas like coach house, tiny house, all of that, unless we were to create a definition for that, those are whatever we want to call them. So I think so I'm avoiding getting into that sort of the nomenclature about whether it's a tiny house or a coach house, and just calling it broadly an accessory or a second dwelling. But I'll look for council's direction on whether we include mobile home as specifically permitted as a second dwelling.
Okay, so maybe we can kind of hold that part till the last of this section, and then we can see if we've got consensus there. But I'll go to the very first bullet if I could, and then read it, and then we'll see if we have consensus here. This is now, the first one is permitted on lots that meet the minimum lot size of the zone in which they are located. So Do we have consensus there? Ian,
Yep.
Jeff,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes,
Claus?
Yes,
All right, and myself, yes. So we have consensus there. Next one, no minimum dwelling size. Maximum dwelling size would be 50% of the floor area of the principal dwelling. Consensus there. I'll turn it around and go backwards this time. Claus,
well, we discussed earlier about no minimum size on another issue, so why are we going with 50% on this?
Agreed.
okay, so then, so I guess then I'm going to ask, I think we chose, did we choose 100%, the same size? I think we chose the same
We
size
did.
as the existing, right?
If I may, Reeve, I do have a question on that.
Yeah, but is that what you're proposing then, Claus, that we go to the same size, like the same as we did on the other one?
Yes.
Okay, and what's your question, please?
Okay, my question is, if we do that, a person's got a 10-acre lot and they want to put a secondary tiny homes, coach house, whatever. Now, maybe we don't have anything to say about this, but it would be a separate septic system for that particular house?
Maybe we can
Like a-
talk separately with the, about the, yeah, or did you want to comment on that right now, Carl?
So that's up to council. So I've seen a lot of zoning bylaws that require it to be serviced, the secondary dwelling to be serviced with the same septic system, the same well as exists as the primary. One of the reasons that that's presented for that is to sort of discourage somebody from essentially trying to get a severance in there. At the end of the day, a severance is going to happen or not happen based on whether it complies with the OP policies. So it then, we know now that the health unit would not necessarily say no to a separate septic system somewhere on that property. So then it's up to council then whether you feel that this is an appropriate restriction or not.
Okay, but
Okay,
so I think what I'll do is I'll come back to the septic system right after to see if we have consensus here. But I think what you're saying, Claus, is you're suggesting that the maximum dwelling size of this should be equal to the floor area of the principal dwelling. Is that correct?
yes, but with a separate septic system.
I know, but so I'm just, yeah, but I guess I'll go around and see if we've got consensus, first of all, for the size.
Okay.
And then we'll ask about this, the septic system. So Karen?
so curiosity is, because of the fact that we're doing this as an accessory dwelling detached,
Yeah,
and we have already in place, don't we, somewhere where you can't build more than one on one property? So how do we get it so that you can build a house that's equal to the same size as your primary? Is this now changing everything that we have in place? Like, and I'm thinking of further down, can you put more than one accessory dwelling on a lot, would be the question, I guess.
Well, even if you could put one on, my concern also would be that this would be, if we propose this, if we allow this, then this would be a very, very easy way for someone to get an extra severance. This is basically, it would be like getting an extra severance, wouldn't it? It's the same type of thing, isn't it?
No.
No?
There's
Carl, I
still,
can, yeah. Can you respond to that, Carl, or what?
An extra severance is only granted if it's applied for, goes through the land division process at the county, and then we'd be reviewing whether it complies with the provisions of our official plan. So if somebody were to build, I guess, a second dwelling that's 95% the size of the first or 120% the size of the first somewhere else on the lot, that would not automatically entitle them to a severance. It may build, because they'd still have to apply, they'd still have to go through that process. it's likely maybe an easier sell to get that severance approved later on, because then they'd be looking to formalize that existing situation, but it doesn't inherently it doesn't give them legal status in that direction unto itself.
Yeah, but it still would allow them to have a second, you could call it a second house on the same lot.
In terms of the legal distinction, the distinction would be the two houses would be vended in one transaction because it'd be one lot, and a severance could be vended as two separate transactions. So there is a legal distinction between the two dwellings on one lot versus a severance, which would be two separately vendable lots.
Okay, so I'm going to go to you, Jeff, also, but I just want to make sure that I've got what Claus said about it, and Karen, I just wondered if have you made up your mind yet there on that?
Yep, I have made up my mind.
So
I don't think it should be 100%. One was within a dwelling, where this one is strictly a distinct detached dwelling. So I don't think the detached should be 100% of the existing dwelling, but I don't know if dropping it down as far as 50% is enough.
well, we need to, if you want to put something different on, we can come back to that, but I'll just go to Jeff first. So Jeff.
I throw a hypothetical out there. Like, I mean, what happens if I want to flip that? So I have hypothetically, I have a 5 acre lot and I have 1,000 square foot of a small 1,000 square foot house on it. And I want to say, you know what, that's where my parents are no longer going to live. And I'm going to build a 2,000 square foot house right beside it. Well, now which one becomes my secondary unit? Can I build a bigger one and then call the other one my original one a secondary unit? Because if that's what I want to, like, I mean, that's one of those things where you may have people that do that. There's a small house, it's on a huge lot, and I want to build my big family home now beside that. I think farmers have done that. Maybe they do that. They have to look for severances, but I mean, I've seen in areas where like the person stays with the family farm and the new family builds this big monstrosity of the house in front of the farmer's house, and then which one becomes at that point? Which one's a secondary and which one's the? I just want to throw that ask to Carl because I think we're in a totally different situation now. Can we propose that that's available to do that or?
But so as I was saying, I still, the results of this would still be that particular person. They may have a house. Their primary house is 1,000 feet, but as you said, they build a house. They get we allow them to do an accessory and they build it twice as big. It becomes 2,000 square feet. So the result of it basically is, I know it's not a separate severance, but the results of it is like a separate severance, I think. But Carl, maybe you can respond to Jeff there.
So I think the councillor raises, it's an excellent situation. So I think, let's say we go with the 50%. And if there was a house on that lot, say like a 1,600 square foot house on that lot, then going by the 50% rule, then they can only get an accessory dwelling of 800 square feet. They cannot build a 3,000 square foot home and then I guess just flip which one we call the accessory. So certainly, to respond to the Reeves question, if there was and as Jasmine said, if there were say 2,000 square foot homes on a lot, the Planning Act would not allow somebody to sell one of those homes and the land on which it's located without going through a Planning Act consent. So that consent would be required before one of those can be the lot can be divided and sold.
Okay, so Jeff, before I go on to Ian, and then I'm going to come back to Karen because you may have a different idea there, which is fine. But Jeff, where do you stand on this, the amount?
I'm saying there's no maximum dwelling size. I think if someone wants to go bigger and then do a swap, and you have the space to do it, and you have everything else, it doesn't mean you're going to get a severance. I mean, a severance is that means that you can sell that. It's two different people that can own it. So I mean, like, if you know, it's you as the homeowner that you have to make that decision of what the resale value is going to be down the road, and that's not like, I mean, so to me, it's if they want to build a bigger unit and they're able to do it, and then switch it and call the other one a secondary unit and have two houses on a 5-acre lot. Once again, if the health unit, and you can do it with the septic systems and everything else, I mean, the powers too does not mean you're going to get a severance. And I think if anything, we want to make sure that if people are going through that are, you know, it's written pretty clearly that if you think this is the way you're going to get a severance, you're going to get a rude awakening, and that's not the way to do it. Do the severance the right way, because this is not the way to do it.
Yeah. So, but just to be clear, if that all happened, there's still only one owner. So if the property went to be sold, it all has to be sold to one owner, right?
Yep.
Okay, which presents some problems, I think.
That's
so
someone.
I think we're not very close yet to getting consensus, because Claus went for the 50%, and sorry, no, Claus was proposing that we go to the 100%, and you're proposing no amount, and I'm going to ask Ian.
So you know what? I don't really have any problem with that. Wants to build a 3,000 square foot house. He only has a 500 square foot there existing. Away you go. I just think that numbering the number of accessory dwellings per lot is keeping it down to one, and maintaining that must share driveway with the principal dwelling stops people from getting into that bypassing the severance situation.
Okay.
One quick question for you. If we allow this to go through, how does that affect development fees? Are these houses subject to the same development fees as if it was a new build on a new lot?
So Carl, I think maybe Carl or Jasmine might want to answer that, because that's a good question. Do people pay the development charge for the accessory building?
I don't know that answer. I can look it up and get back to you.
Well, again, then that particular point, because I think that's a pretty relevant question. It's a very relevant question. I would hope, I mean, as the development charges is a tool that we can use, but it's a very important question about that. Do they pay development charges on the accessory? And again, I'm just wondering, is this another thing that we should just simply red flag until we get that answer back? Because, you know, if we have all the answers and we have all the facts, we can make a better decision. I don't want us to give direction to staff and then start changing it again. Even though we can, it's nice if we get all the information and the facts in front of us. So is this something else we should red flag until we find out?
That makes sense.
Yes.
Okay, Carl, back to you. Then I think what you're getting, we can't seem to have. Well, we've got Ian and Jeff saying right now that they have no problems with, you know, in other words, no maximum dwelling size. So we've got two saying no, none. But then the question of development charges has come up. So I guess, if you want to respond to that, Carl, please.
Yeah. If I may, I think I'd be looking at development charges as a bit of a separate conversation. So in this case, we're making a planning decision on whether we feel that this is a good use of land, looking at community impacts and doing what the province is, frankly, it's mandating us to do in terms of creating these accessory units. The question of development charges is a good one, and certainly if I were creating a development charges bylaw right now, I'd recommend that we include that, because ultimately we're creating a new household on a lot that's going to be requiring services and going to be requiring infrastructure and all of that. So it would certainly be logical that development charges are paid for, and certainly we can we can look into what the policy is right now. I don't know either, and we can report back to council on that. But I think, if I may, my suggestion to council is I guess the planning consideration of how do we want to define and regulate the size of accessory buildings on a lot is a separate question than development and how do we recoup the cost through development charges.
Okay, so I'm going to put Karen on the spot then, and to see if you have a feeling on this.
Well, I think the intent from the tiny homes or the provision for the accessory dwelling wasn't to have a larger building on a lot. It was more so to have something smaller, but I agree with Jeff's comment is that it could be a property that's got a small house on it and they want to let a family come in and build something bigger. So the family in it move over and somebody else move into the small one. But I agree with Ian. I don't want to lose development charges on a much larger house that we would get if it was being built somewhere else, because it's under this term of the accessory dwelling. So I'd much rather wait until I know that answer on development.
So can you still work with this if we just red flag this for now then, Carl?
No.
So,
Hey, Carl?
oh, I'll let Councillor Carroll speak first, and then I'll.
Okay, yes, okay, then.
Can we not,
Yes,
I was just gonna ask, and once again, throw to Carl too as well, but I think just to hopefully answer the question though is, can we not just now say, like, these builds are whatever, must adhere to any development charges that or any standard development charges for that? Because I agree with Council Jennings and Council Straight about that. I mean, like we don't want to lose those development charges, so why don't we just put that in now, or have that as part of it now, saying that they're part of development charges.
So if I could just, I think then what I'll do to move this forward is I'm going to agree with the consensus coming from Jeff and Ian on this, and I agree totally with you, Karen, regarding the issue of the development charges. So I think then that we have consensus on the size, and that means then we're not going to put a maximum dwelling size on these lots. Again, hoping that we definitely have a separate conversation with one of the conditions be that we're allowed to have development charges on the accessory lot. So I think you've got kind of consensus and direction, but it's kind of red flagged when you come back, we'll red flag it, but just so that you can report back if you find anything out about if we can still have another discussion about the development charges. Does that make sense? Yes, Carol?
So the direction that I have right now is just, I'll throw together a placeholder policy that states that removes that maximum dwelling size, maximum secondary dwelling size. So we'll take that off for now, but then we'll have that discussion about development charges. I think amending a development charges bylaw would be a separate process than amending a planning act, like amending a zoning bylaw, for instance. And I think there may be certain challenges in that, because the development charges study, of course, goes through a very rigorous formula for how you calculate and how you charge. So I think we can take a look at that. But as you said earlier, we're not setting anything in stone here. There's still the public meeting that we're going through. These policies that whatever direction we decide we like tonight, there's a good chance that we may end up adopting something different when all is said and done, once we've heard from the community. So I think I like that we're not necessarily feeling like we're committing to something and knowing that that's the only option that we can proceed. It's a great discussion we're having here.
Okay, so I'm going to go on to the second. I'm just going to read the second bullet then.
I just need to note a couple things about the development charges. As Carl noted, we cannot just amend the development charges bylaw. We do need to complete a study in order to amend that bylaw or replace it. I do want to note that the development charges bylaw is up for review in 2021.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we have to do it every 5 years, right?
Correct,
The
yeah,
development charges review has to be done has to come up every 5 years, I
correct.
believe. Okay, thanks, Jasmine. So the next bullet then is no minimum dwelling size. Maximum, oh, sorry, the next one,
Read that.
sorry, the third one. Permitted in interior side yards and rear sides only, subject to the same setbacks as for a main dwelling. And the existing accessory structures within required setbacks can be converted to residential units so long as no habitable room windows face the shared property line. Do we have consensus on that on that particular bullet? I think I'll start with you, Ian, if I could, please.
Yeah, I have no problem with it. I like it actually.
Okay, Jeff
I have no problem with that. I'm
and
good.
Karen
No problem.
and Claus.
No problem.
You guys are so agreeable. Thank you. Okay, so Carl, we have consensus on that bullet. Do you make any final comment on that then?
No, I appreciate that. I just wanted to just give, just for council's information, in the rural zone, which covers most of our municipality, the interior side yard, the minimum interior side yard is 6 meters, 20 feet, minimum rear yard is 7.5 meters, roughly 25 feet. So those are the sorts of setbacks. But if council is looking at removing the minimum dwelling sizes and hypothetically allowing larger accessory buildings, then I think I would agree with your position that we just want to maintain those existing single dwelling setbacks for the accessory buildings too.
Well, and like if anything, we might want to, at least for the side yards, we may want to increase that slightly, because we're now all of a sudden going to allow any size accessory detached building. So we may want to look at that setback and make it a little bit more. I don't know. Is that a possibility? Yes, Carl?
That's up to council. I think in terms of looking at increasing the setback, I think it would be a little bit more complex, because then we'd be in the position of defining what's the primary and what's the secondary dwelling. So my recommendation would be to just retain the same setbacks and the same zone standards for the second building.
Okay, fine. The next bullet, limit of 1 story if in a settlement area, denser residential development. So limit of a 1 story if it's in a settlement area. Consensus there? I'll start with you, Claus.
I would say yes.
And Karen
Yes.
and Ian
Yep.
and Jeff.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
And I will say yes also. So that one you have, Carl. And the next one is must share a driveway with principal dwelling. Ian?
Yeah, this one in my mind is key for this whole thing, because if not,
Yeah.
you own 400 acres, you can put one 4 kilometers down the road or something like that. Then now you're jetting the severance thing. This
Exactly. So,
it's critical.
okay, Jeff?
I agree. I just wonder if there's like a jet off of that driveway at all. Like, you know what I mean? Like something that's off the driveway. Like, I mean, like, because we're saying on the driveway, then are we going to say you can't be any? I'm going through this quick again, but there's no place saying it can't be further than this from the other house. So
I think when we're saying, I think what we're really talking about is the entrance. The entrance. It
Just the
has to
entrance.
be. It has. We're not talking about. It has to be the same entrance.
Essentially, I think that's yes.
I think that's what we mean.
Off the road.
Yes.
Okay. And then
Yeah,
you gotta
it's-
go from there. Okay.
Yeah, one entrance off the main road.
Okay.
And if they enter off the main road and then they want to veer off to the left to the accessory, we can't stop that, I don't think.
Well, I guess we can if we want to put a saying how close, because they use Ian's example. So they go off the road and they're on a 400-acre property and then they have a huge driveway going the opposite direction. Does that still not jet out the, like, do we need to have a stipulation where it's got to be somewhat close to the other house? Because I
That's a
agree.
very, I think
That's where
that's
we
a
get
really
into
good
issue.
point. Maybe I'll ask, let's give that question to Carol.
So I've seen some municipalities do that, but not every municipality do that. So yes, at this point, the way the policy is worded right now is that it shares the same entrance. So yes, I'm certainly not getting into the zoning question about where the driveway can fork off from the main entrance. That's I'm not sure we necessarily want to go into that sort of detail in zoning. But what some zoning bylaws do, just to ensure, just to keep everything together, is they do establish a maximum setback for the accessory building from the main building. So say it can only be, say, 40 meters or 100 meters or 20 meters or some number that the zoning bylaw specifies. So we can do that, but we don't have to do that. I've seen it go both ways, and it becomes more of a preference for council as to, and another option too is you can create that sort of requirement depending on whether it's a larger lot or a smaller lot too. So you can go that route if you like as well.
But so you're talking about like a setback from the existing building, but I think what you're pointing out, Ian, is very, very important because in fact, if they have, 500 acres, they can come off into the same entrance and then have a half-mile lot down the road in some place. That's your concern, right, Ian?
Well, yeah. Well, now even thinking about it maybe a little bit more is, somebody comes in, they build their house down the road, they start putting their driveway in, put the driveway in down there, and then all of a sudden they, put in a thing a permit to move their driveway entrance from the existing one, and they shut it down, and then they move it down the road half the way. Now all of a sudden you kind of get yourself maybe in a little bit of a pickle. I kind of like I like the idea of maybe it has to be within a certain geographical area of the main residence. I don't know what that might be, whether it be within 5 acres of it or 10 acres or something like that. But I don't know what kind of control you can put on that to limit people from taking advantage of it.
Well, I agree with what you're saying, and I think it goes back to Karen's point, which was, and I'll go back to the original focus of this meeting, and the original focus was accessory dwelling discussion. So, we're wanting to do this to allow accessory dwellings to the existing dwelling, which would defeat the whole purpose if we were going to allow it to go anywhere on the property. So I like the idea of us maybe thinking about a setback, a limit of the setback to the existing building. How much that would be, I don't know, but by allowing it to go anywhere on the 500 acres, then we're kind of defeating the whole purpose of accessory dwelling. Are we not? We're just basically what we're doing is allowing, I think, private homes, and we're allowing somebody to get around the rules. I think of severances. It still presents a problem when the property goes up for sale. But anyways, what about this, council? So I'll put the question to council then. Should we be putting some sort of a limitation on how far away it can be from the existing building? I think Jeff, I see you shaking your head, but do you think do we have enough expertise right now to say how many feet that might be, or is this something that we can give direction to staff to come back, like we red flag it and then the staff comes back to say, okay, well, we think it should be X number of feet away from the existing building? What do you think about that, Jeff?
That's what I was thinking. I don't have a number. I don't want to make up a number because I don't think that's fair.
So
I'd be curious.
Sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry, Jeff.
Sorry, I said I don't want to make up a number.
Yeah.
But I think it should be, we should have a number. I'd be curious, and not that other municipalities are doing it better or worse than us, because we don't know that another municipality could have just made up the number too as well. And they're saying that's what they're sticking with. But I think it might be interesting to kind of go away and come back, red flag it like you say, and maybe Carl can give us a few examples of different ones that do that, and then we can kind of discuss that. But I want to think about it before I arbitrarily put a number on it.
Yeah.
Okay, I believe that we have this direction here, sort of consensus, but Carl, I'm going to go to you, but I think Ian had one last comment there, maybe Ian?
Yeah, I think that the staff have a pretty good idea what it is that we're trying to avoid. And I think that we just let them come back with a solution to
Okay.
it. Carry on.
Okay.
One last thing to add, Reed, was I'd like to add a bullet point in there. Only one accessory dwelling allowed per lot. We don't want to have 7 or 8 of them on there.
Yeah. Okay, well, so I think then this is going to be just red flag to get this further information. If you can come back to us, Carl, with a proposal of this setback or how close it has to be to the existing building. Okay?
So for
Yes,
clarity,
Carol?
I just want to, so we were talking about sharing the driveway with the principal dwelling. So that was the original topic. So I think council has already provided consensus related to bringing back a proposal related to how close the accessory dwelling is supposed to be. So maybe we should finish the conversation related to sharing the driveway. So there's nothing really to red flag. It's just an additional direction from council.
Yeah, well, I guess the only reason I mentioned the red flag is that we would like to add something to this bullet. We're just not sure what figure to add. So we're asking staff to come back with that proposal.
I mean, while they are kind of related, they're not necessarily dependent on each other, is what I'm saying. You can make a decision on the driveway now,
Yeah.
and then we can come back with the other information.
Exactly. Okay, that's fine. Then the last bullet was maybe I think that maybe are we leaving the last bullet the same as we did with the first section? That's permitted on all properties in which a single detached home is permitted use except for the natural hazard, the environmental issue, and we just red flagged the private road part of it. Is that okay?
That's good for me.
Okay by me.
I think we've got consensus on that last bullet then, Carl. Is that okay on that? Do you have any comment on that?
Yes, no, I think that's, we'll certainly take your same direction as for the attached, accessory.
Okay, so thanks to this one for everybody, and we're going on to the next one. But before we go to the next one, Karen?
Because I'd asked the question before about a mobile home.
Oh, yes, the mobile.
Does it get
home.
addressed in that topic, or does it get addressed in the next one, which deals with minimum dwelling size? Because I'm sure that will be a question that residents will have is a mobile home considered a tiny home?
Okay, so we can maybe draw that into this discussion, this one. I just
Okay.
want to also make sure, were we going to make any further comments on 1 or 2 septic systems? Did we have to make any decision on that, Carl, for you?
The policy that's proposed right now does not get into septic systems. It just leaves it up to the health unit. So unless council wants to see the both dwellings on the same septic system, I can make that change in the zoning, but that's up to council how you want to handle that.
I guess my initial thought would be that we leave those type of decisions up to the health unit. So why wouldn't we do the same thing?
Yeah.
I agree.
Correct.
Okay, I think that I see. I think that's we've got consensus there that that could be left up to the health unit then. Yes, Carl.
And to speak to Councillor Jennings' question about mobile homes, these are So a mobile home has a separate and distinct definition within our zoning bylaw. So it's not it's classed differently than other kinds of dwelling units. So if council is okay with the mobile home counting as a secondary dwelling, I can work that into the policy to make sure that that's in there. Alternatively, if council and a separate discussion is mobile homes as the principal and only dwelling unit on any other lot. So council may not give the same answer to that question as they do to the question of whether it would qualify as an accessory dwelling. So I think for now, I'll look for council's direction on whether we want to consider a mobile home as an appropriate accessory dwelling, and then we can move on to the next one about minimum dwelling size.
Okay, so before we go to minimum dwelling size, then I guess I'll open it up to council whether we're going to allow mobile homes to be accessory dwellings. So I'll open it up. Ian?
I have no problem with the mobile home being an accessory dwelling. I think that as long as it's hooked up to the septic and has its well and it's skirted and all those other good things that they should be done, then I have no problem with it.
Yeah, well, it would already have the well and the septic system because we're proposing it right now as an accessory dwelling. So it would already have to have a well, and it would already have to pass the health unit for a septic. So yeah, it would already have those two. But you're saying that you have no problem with a mobile home as a secondary dwelling.
No, I don't have any issue with it.
Okay, Jeff?
Either way.
Karen?
I don't have a problem with it as an accessory or a primary dwelling.
Okay, but yeah, so right now we're just dealing with the accessory, I guess. And cause?
I have a question first. Is it not the intention, Carl, that the tiny home will be built as a stick home, okay, on a foundation of some sort?
That's usually how I see them. That's usually how I see them regulated.
So if we go the mobile home situation, would we then require these people to put it onto a foundation of a permanent tiny home structure?
That would be up to council.
So do we have to make that kind of decision now, or can we make that decision later? I guess that question is for you, Carl.
Well, I can propose, and certainly we're not making any final decisions tonight. If council would like to see it like to see a mobile home sort of anchored so that we can ensure that it's more or less can function as more or less of a permanent structure as much as possible, then we can take that direction and work on some wording and present that back to council for consideration.
Okay, so back to you, Claus. What's your answer then on this?
I would like to see it as a permanent structure on a foundation, so it's there permanently.
But what you're saying it's yes to a mobile home as an accessory building.
Yes.
The specifics can come up later, which Carl just said he could come back with some wording for that. But just generally this consensus is for mobile homes being permitted for accessory dwellings. So you've got consensus on that, Carl. Okay. Now, if we can go on to the third section, that's the minimum dwelling size.
So in this case, by minimum dwelling size, we're looking at the minimum dwelling size of the main unit on the lot, or in most cases, what would be the only unit on the lot. So our zoning bylaw requires houses to be between 850 or a minimum, depending on the zone, of 850 square feet in limited services residential to close to 1,100 square feet in the general residential zone. And those requirements are common in zoning bylaws, just to establish a consistent building, a consistent building pattern within a neighborhood. And most zoning bylaws I've seen require some sort of minimum dwelling size requirement, not necessarily the same as ours, but something close to it. And one of the things that we've been hearing in the consultation we did for this earlier on is that this was a bit of a minimum dwelling sizes are a bit of a barrier for affordability, and certainly houses, as they've gradually gotten bigger over the years, people don't necessarily need as much space. So when we looked at what our neighbors in other municipalities have done, is they've typically, even if they allow tiny homes or other accessory buildings on smaller lots, for the most part, not all the cases, Leeds and the Thousand Islands removed the minimum dwelling sizes altogether, but in most cases they've retained minimum dwelling sizes of some number. So I'm proposing that we retain a reduced minimum dwelling size of 807 square feet for a dwelling in all of our zones. So that's lower than what we have right now in most of our zones. And that would allow for a broader range of housing options, including more affordable housing throughout the township. So I'll look for council's direction on minimum dwelling sizes. So we can either retain that, keep something similar to what we have now. If we were to remove it altogether, then and sort of tag it to what the building code is going to require, then we can be looking at dwellings as small as 250 to 350 square feet. So, and again, we're just looking at the main dwelling here, or the only dwelling on a lot. We've already decided we're not going with minimum dwelling sizes for secondary dwellings. So I'll look for council's direction on that.
And this question is more for new buildings.
Correct.
Okay, so I'll open this up to council. Right now it's being proposed at 807 square feet. I'll open up for anybody yet. Anybody wants to start off on council? I'll just go around and ask consensus then. Jeff, comments, and you can start it off.
Quick comment. I'm game for the 807 that Carl's proposing. I'm not very keen on going to none, because I think there's got to be sort of a part of when you're building a house too as well, and on those roads is there's a tax base behind it that is fair to the other people on that road. So I think it's we have to be cautious of how small we go. On that note too as well, I mean, we have a minimum size right now, and I would garden to guess 90%, if not higher, of the houses that have been built are all bigger than our minimum requirements anyways. So I mean, like, I don't think we have a big problem here, and I don't think reducing the size is going to fix the affordability of it, because it's still going to be expensive to buy that same lot. It's still going to be, there's still a lot of other expenses that go along with it that, I mean, are not feasible for some of the people that are in that bracket. So I'd like to keep it at that. I think keeping it at that 800 makes sense overall. So I mean, I hear that the other side of it, and I know that they're probably keenly interested in how we're going to go with this. But I don't see that being the solution for affordable housing.
Yeah. Now, there may be people who already have a lot who is looking at being able to put up a smaller house, or people who have severances yet, who wants to go through the severance process and put up a smaller house. But so you've said yes to the 807 feet. So I'm going to go around.
Which is pretty small when you think about it. So it's
yeah. And you got a good point there. Most houses going up in Montague, I don't know whether I've seen a house go up in Montague in the last while that was under 1,000 feet.
Or under 1,500 for that matter.
Exactly. So in your thought there, are you okay with this?
No, it's good. I have no problem with it.
Okay, Karen?
No, I don't think I have a problem with it.
Okay, and Claus?
I'd like to see it a little bit more. I'd like to see it close to 1,000, but
Well, right now it's, right, how much is it right now, Carl? What's our minimum?
$850.
Depending on the zone, it varies. So on limited services residential areas, then that's 850 square feet. And I think it makes sense to allow smaller ones on there because you're often dealing with very small lots. So I think allowing you to go smaller there is reasonable. In the general residential zone, that takes in some of your larger lot subdivisions. The minimum is 1,076 square feet, and I am just flipping through here to find the minimum in the rural zone, which is the most common zone, and the minimum in that is 93 square meters. So that's about 1,000 square feet in the rural zone.
Yeah, so what we're proposing now is we're lowering that. So, and I have already had Jeff, Ian, and Karen, I think, say yay to that. So we have consensus there, Klaus.
thank you.
And I would agree with the size being proposed also. So that is everything on that section, Carl, I think. And the next then we have to deal with is the next steps. So maybe if Carl, if you wanted to present that next steps to us.
Yeah. First, if I may, and I'm just going to look for council's direction on mobile homes as the primary dwelling on the lot. And again, we don't need to come to a decision on that. If that's something that council would like to red flag, then we can dig into that specifically. I didn't dig into that as part of this exercise, just based on the wide amount of material we were already covering. So I wasn't thinking that this report here covered the be all and end all of housing. We certainly, an expectation we're going to be looking at other subjects as well. So I'll look for council's direction on how you want to how or whether you want to proceed on that.
Okay, so I don't think we necessarily have to yet red flag it, because I'll ask council to see how we feel, and we may already have consensus there. So I think the question now is that, do we want to allow mobile homes as permanent structures, as a new permanent structure on a property in Montague? So that's the question we have, I believe. Karen first.
I thought it's any tiny home, which would include a mobile home as a primary home. Is that not the question?
I thought I might be wrong. I thought you meant, Carl, when you were presenting this, that you were specifically wanting us to talk about mobile homes, or am I wrong?
Yeah, so a mobile home has a separate definition in the zoning bylaw, and any zoning bylaw that I've seen that defines, say, a tiny home, that does not, like a mobile home is looked at as a separate sort of dwelling unit. And if we go with an 807 square foot minimum dwelling size, a lot of mobile homes are larger than that. So if we were to allow them as a standalone use throughout the sort of the rural community, then the minimum dwelling size in a lot of cases won't specifically exclude a mobile home. So I think in this case, certainly they can be a more affordable option. Not always. Certainly they can be quite expensive these days. Modular homes are built a little bit differently. Visually they're similar to a mobile home, but a modular home has a different sort of building code classification, and most zoning bylaws include a modular home as a single detached dwelling within the zoning bylaw. So in this case, a mobile home that has a separate classification right now is only allowed in a mobile home park in the township. So the question that I've heard, and it's come up on the consultation as well, is as a suggestion that this is a potential affordable housing tool within the in the municipality to consider.
So I think maybe specifically we could see if we have consensus on just the general question. Would we want to allow mobile homes as permanent homes, permanent structures and homes in Montague Township, anywhere in Montague Township? I think that's the question that we could ask. Right now, we allow it, but only in a mobile home setting. So do we now want to completely change that and allow mobile homes as a permanent home anywhere in Montague? So I'll open up to council if anybody wants to start that discussion off. Karen?
So is a tiny home allowed as a primary residence?
I guess, like, and first of all, I guess the 807
Is no longer a tiny home?
Well, I guess a lot of tiny houses, they're a lot smaller than that.
Yeah, like 300, 400, 500 square feet. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Carl?
Well, the way that the bylaw is presented right now is that a tiny home, is usually, and they're defined differently by different bylaws, but they're usually in the range of, say, 300 to 600 square feet. So the way the bylaws, the way we're proceeding right now is that any home of that size, a tiny home, coach house, what have you, would only be allowed as an accessory. So there'd already have to be a house on the lot, and a tiny home would be allowed as an accessory house anywhere in the township. But if this is a lot on which there is nothing, then it would need to be 807 square feet that would be your minimum dwelling size, and a tiny home would not be permitted as the primary use on a lot.
Yeah.
Right.
So back to the question about mobile homes. Generally, do we want to allow mobile homes as permanent structures, permanent homes in Montague? Anybody sort of want to start off as being for that or against it? Karen?
We could put restrictions to say that a mobile home would go on a smaller size lot versus the 2+ size acre lots. Because I don't think you'd want to put a mobile home up in, say, for example, Bauer Boulevard or Bristow or any of those, because that doesn't really suit the neighborhood. But we could create a lot size to allow for them to make it different.
I really think without making a real permanent decision tonight on that, I have a feeling that we're going to have to maybe give this a little bit more thought. But Carl, I did see your hand go up.
Oh, I was, yes, to respond to Councillor Jennings, yes, that is an option. Council can consider, say, a minimum lot size or allow mobile homes, say, within rural zones, but not within general residential, or however, if you feel that there's a reasonable regulation that could apply, then we can write that into the zoning.
And I mean, I don't have anything personally against a mobile home being used as a residential home, but I really have a concern and an issue about where we're going to allow it, because as it mentioned, I don't think that people living in some of our settlement areas would want us to allow mobile homes to be moved in up and down the street. And that's what we're going to do if we allow mobile homes right now. So I feel that we need to kind of maybe slow down on this issue, red flag this issue, and maybe all give this some thought, because it wasn't specifically one of the three that we were talking about anyways, but I have some real concerns, and I think we need to, we might need some more information and proposals from you, Carl.
Question, Reeve?
Okay with council, or does council have another idea?
Question, Reeve?
Ian?
I agree with you, Reeve. I think that needs to be put on the back burner for right now, and we need to put a little bit of thought into it.
Okay, and Jeff, I see you nodding there, yes. Is that okay with you, Claus?
Yeah, I think we do need to have some serious thoughts about this, and I agree with Councillor Jennings was just saying, you know, are we going to allow them in a residential area? My first thought right off the bat was, what reaction would we get from, like, example I give you on Roger Stevens? There's 2 brand new beautiful homes going up that are certainly well in the $300,000 range. If someone decides to buy a lot beside there and put up a mobile home, what's going to be the reaction of that? So we need to give that some serious thought.
Okay, so sorry, we're going to put this one on the back burner for you, Carl. Okay, Karen?
But for the residents, how far on the back burner? Because it was something that was discussed at our meeting that was at the township office.
Yeah, well, when I meant back burner, I just meant till our next discussion.
Okay,
Okay.
That's what I meant. Thank you.
okay.
So anything else on next steps, Carol?
Well, I think firstly, I'd like to, I think right now I have some good direction to go ahead on quite a lot here. So I think what I view as the next step with council's permission is that I would come back with more detailed and defined policy, something that we're ready to go to the public with and schedule the public meeting. The red flag options will be sort of sidebar policies within that report, and then we can just get council's direction on those specific items to potentially move forward on those if you're comfortable with that approach. But ultimately, this is it's your policy, and we want to make sure that you're comfortable with the process that we're following, and making sure that this is that we do the consultations that we need to do. And don't forget, there will be a required statutory public meeting before we can consider approving anything.
So Carl, what timelines wise, when do you feel when would you feel we should have our next meeting about this?
That's certainly up to council, and I can work those details out with Jasmine. I'm not sure what your schedule is for the rest of the summer, but if you have room for this on the agenda in August, then I can certainly
I really like the idea of us possibly having one more special committee of the whole meeting to specifically talk about the official plan and the accessory dwelling and so on issue, and not maybe bring it into a regular meeting. That's only my thought. And but time wise, I would think that if we could just leave it, then that it would be at the call of the chair, and I would call a special meeting, but I would wait until you gave us the go-ahead that you've done enough the work that you need to do to bring back the information that's been red flagged.
And I'd be happy to work that out with Jasmine and find out something that we can schedule something. But yes, I think the special meeting format for this works quite well. But if council would like, ultimately, I like the idea of maintaining the momentum on this subject as we move along and as things start to open up. But if council would like to take another look at these particular items in a special meeting, say in sometime in August, then we can sort of work out a schedule that fits for everybody.
Is that okay with council?
Yep.
Okay, I think so. I think then that's what we'll do. We'll just wait until you let us know, and then I will call a special meeting like I did for this one, and we'll just focus on this issue. Okay. So if is there anything else then before we go to the next I have a mover, and I need a mover and a seconder for this, but I'll read it first. Okay, then the next motion is that the committee of the whole receive the housing options report and that the following be recommended to council. That staff be directed to draft official plan and zoning bylaw amendments to accommodate increased residential housing options within the township. I need a mover and a seconder for that motion, and moved by Karen.
Hello.
And seconded by Jeff. Sorry, I can't see you, Claus.
I just said hello.
So all in favor?
Yes.
Of this? And Claus, yes, and everybody else, all in favor? Opposed? So that is carried. Thank you then for this report and all the work that you've done so far, Carl. I think it's been a very good discussion. Again, I have to thank you and all of the other staff that have helped you to bring this information to us. And the detail that the council has discussed, I really like what we've done, and I appreciate the input from everybody. And we'll look forward to our next meeting and then eventually moving it to the consultation with the public at a future date. Sooner, we'll say sooner than later. So anything else before we close off? Seeing none, then I have the next motion, and that is, I'm sorry, yes?
I have a few questions from members of the public.
Oh, yes, okay. The question from the public, yes.
So I have a question. So this was related to the first item, I believe. I came in around that time. So does this allow for a house that is a rental house to have a second rental unit in it?
Yeah, it would.
It would, is right.
Carl, I'm
good
going to go to
but
Carl
it
on
would.
this for a sec. Carl?
Yes, so Councillor Carroll is correct. That absolutely. So we do not, through zoning, we're not going to be regulating occupancy. So who owns or who rents a dwelling. So if the zoning allows a dwelling, whether it's owned or rented, then the accessory dwelling can then be, it would still be permitted. So that's, the Planning Act requirements do not allow us to create that sort of distinction between the property owner, the main occupant. It's directing us to focus on specifically the land use.
You could have done
Okay.
that too, right?
Yes,
Sorry,
Jeff. Go
I
ahead.
mean, you could have done that before too, right? Before, like
Yes.
with our current regulations?
That's correct. Yes. So the current accessory dwelling requirements we have don't speak to the ownership in the ownership model of the house.
There we go.
Okay, any other questions?
I have one. Question was, I thought the whole idea in the provincial mandate was to make it easier to increase affordable housing. This sounds more like council is dictating more rules for the taxpayers to build something on their own land, either for family members or to help them afford to keep their home with a rental unit.
Huh?
Well, I think to the answer to the first part of this question would be, we are doing something about, we've done a lot, I think, to provide more affordable housing. That's my opinion of the first part of that question. Anybody else want to comment? Carol? Anybody? Jeff?
I just want to say, I thought that a lot of this discussion, we're trying to, how can we make this as easy as possible and to open it up as much as possible too as well. So there's no limitations for people. So I'd like to think we can, because there is no minimum, there's no maximum. We went both ways. I think we try to make it as accessible and as easy for people, but also if people wanted to do more, they could do more. So I think we played the whole deck was shown there. It wasn't just, I don't know, I like to think we did, but I mean, I'm open to hearing more about that. If someone wants to email us directly or have a discussion, call us or call me. I don't care. Like if there's more input to have, and we're gonna and the public's gonna have that opportunity to as well when we have the public meeting, because we're not there yet. We're just trying to figure this out. So I mean, like, we're all open for hearing that. And I think I don't want to speak on behalf of council, but I think we're all open for that, and we want to do this right. So the feedback we're looking forward to. So like, this is not set in stone by any means.
No, I agree. Any other questions? Sorry, Ian?
Yeah, I agree with Councilor Carroll. I think that we opened up the book pretty good here. There's far more options right now, just with what we discussed tonight, than that there was originally. So, you know, I think we're marching down the right path here. But you know, as a public, we have our open house, our open meeting with the public. I think that there's something else that needs to be addressed, and we can definitely do it.
Okay. Any other questions, Jasmine?
That's it. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you then, everybody. Then I have a motion that the committee of the whole meeting do now adjourn at, somebody can tell me the time, please.
8:45.
8:45. All in favor?
2 cents worth in there.
Need to get a mover and a seconder there, Bill.
I'm sorry, what's that?
Get a mover and a seconder there.
Sorry, I moved by
By me.
Claus and then seconded by Karen. All in favor?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I think that's everything then. So thanks to everybody for this. And we'll wait till the next meeting to continue all of these discussions. Again, thanks, Carl, for all the great work.
And
Yes. Great, Carol. Yes.
Jasmine.
it was
Jasmine?
a great discussion. I enjoyed this, and I appreciate the attention to detail that all of you had, and looking at all of the options. This is exactly what I was hoping for, and I look forward to seeing the next steps of this process and how this evolves.
And I guess in closing, the only other thing I was going to say was that, Carol, you must be very, very happy with these hockey decisions lately. Just a
Well,
joke.
It's hard to. Whoever wins this year, it'll be a big asterisk. It just doesn't feel.
All right. Thanks to
Question.
everybody. Good
Question.
night.
Sorry,
Yes.
Claude.
All right.
Claus has a question. Hold on a second. Wait. Claus has something that,
Yeah, Claus.
Yeah, sorry, Jasmine, can I call you tomorrow and try to figure out why I not working?
Yes.
They worked fine every other time, but I must admit my total internet was down, and Bell came and they discovered there's some wires that were chewed from outside or whatever. So I don't know if that's something to do with it or not, but
Yeah, we'll
I need
talk
to get-
tomorrow. I'm sorry.
thank you.
Anything else? Good night, everybody.